This story is something that's haunted me for years, and even now, when I think about it, it sends a chill down my spine. I've never told anyone the full extent of what happened that day. I guess I'm sharing it now because, well, I still don't know if I truly understand what went on. It was a regular Tuesday, just like any other. I was in my junior year at a suburban high school. The building was old, with creaky floors and flickering lights in the hallways. Nothing unusual. I was in the middle of a history lecture when the loudspeaker crackled to life. The voice that came through was calm, almost too calm. "Attention, students. Please lock your doors and remain in your classrooms. We are currently on lockdown. Stay away from the windows and doors. This is not a drill." The words hit me like a wave of ice-cold water. My heart started racing. Everyone in class froze, exchanging confused and nervous glances. No one moved, except for Mr. Myers, our teacher, who calmly went to the door, locked it, and then turned off the lights. He didn't seem rattled, but I could see the faintest tremor in his hands as he pulled down the blinds. "Stay quiet, everyone," he said in a low voice. I could hear the distant sounds of the school's intercom system, announcements that were muffled by the walls. We could barely make out the words, but one thing stood out. "Remain inside. Lock your doors. This is a serious situation." My mind raced. Was this a shooter? Was there someone in the building? The usual lockdown drills didn't feel like this. They were organized, sterile. This felt wrong. I looked around the classroom at my classmates. Everyone was wide-eyed, trying to stay calm, but I could feel the collective tension in the room. The walls felt like they were closing in. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and panicked. Something about the silence felt wrong, as if it had an unnatural weight. About 5 minutes passed, but it felt like an eternity. Then, from down the hall, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A series of loud bangs. Not the kind of bang you hear from a locker door slamming or something falling over. These were sharp, jarring, like the sound of something heavy crashing to the ground. We all stiffened. Mr. Myers didn't move at first, but I could see him tense up. His eyes darted to the classroom door, then back to us. He whispered, "Stay down." It was then I noticed how pale his face had become, how his lips were trembling. He'd been giving off an air of calm, but something had shifted. He wasn't calm anymore. That's when I saw it. At the edge of the window, just beside the blinds, there was a shadow, a figure. It wasn't a student. I knew that much right away. I didn't know who it was, but I had this instinctual feeling of dread. The figure wasn't moving much, just standing there. But every time I looked at it, it seemed to get closer. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to will the image away. But when I opened them, it was still there. The tension in the room grew unbearable. I could hear muffled footsteps now, growing louder. They were coming down the hallway, slow and deliberate. Then the loud bang came again, closer this time, and again, and again. Every time, my heart seemed to skip a beat. Mr. Myers was pacing in the front of the room now, but his eyes kept darting to the door, his expression turning more and more frantic. Then suddenly, the intercom crackled back to life. I thought it would be some comforting voice telling us it was all clear, but instead, the voice was panicked, frantic. The words were hard to make out, but they were something like, "Remain locked. We have not someone. Do not open." The message was cut off abruptly, and that was it. The silence after that was suffocating. We were left in the dark, literally and figuratively. I looked at my friend, Carla, sitting beside me. She looked just as scared as I felt. her hands shaking as she gripped the edge of her desk. Then we both heard it. Footsteps, directly outside the door. Slow, dragging, like someone had no intention of rushing. The footsteps were accompanied by what sounded like breathing, heavy, uneven breaths, as if whoever it was didn't care whether we heard. There was a long pause, a stretch of stillness, before the door handle rattled. My heart pounded in my chest, and I couldn't breathe. I thought for sure this was it. Whoever was out there was trying to get in. Then, just as quickly as it came, the rattling stopped. The footsteps started moving again, but now they were retreating. The sound grew fainter until it was gone completely. But then, a whisper, a soft, low voice, came from the corner of the room right by the window. It was so quiet, barely a breath above a murmur, but I heard it clear as day. "I know you're in there." I turned toward the voice, my breath catching in my throat, but there was nothing. No one was there. My mind was racing, and I couldn't understand what was happening. I had to get out of there. I had to know what was going on. But the door remained locked. We stayed huddled in the darkness, each of us afraid to speak, too scared to move. An hour passed, or maybe two. I don't even know. Time had lost all meaning. The lockdown continued, and the tension never subsided. We could hear nothing from the outside anymore. The silence felt suffocating. The only sound was our breathing and the occasional soft scrape of something moving down the hall. We were isolated in our classroom, with no clue what was happening just beyond the walls. Finally, the lockdown was lifted, but no one told us what had happened. The halls were eerily empty when we left the room. There was no sign of any police or officials. It was as if the entire building had been abandoned. The next day, we were told that everything had been resolved. But when I looked around, I could tell no one believed it. It felt wrong, too wrong. To this day, I don't know who or what was outside that classroom that day. I don't know who was walking those halls, who was breathing down our necks in the darkness. But I do know this. Whatever it wasn't a drill. It wasn't a mistake. And I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there, waiting. So if you ever find yourself in a school lockdown, just remember, don't trust the silence. It might not be as empty as it seems. I'm still not sure if what happened that day was a nightmare, or if I really lived through it. I've kept this to myself for a long time, but I feel like I need to get it out there. This story has haunted me for months, and it's gotten harder to ignore as time passes. It was a regular Tuesday at school, nothing unusual. I was sitting in history class, a little tired, but nothing out of the ordinary. It was around 2:30 p.m. The usual bell had rung earlier, signaling the start of the period, and our teacher, Mr. Harris, was talking about the American Revolution. I don't even remember what he was saying because, honestly, I wasn't paying attention. That's when it happened. The intercom crackled, and the voice of Principal Larkin came through, his tone tight and rushed. He didn't even sound like himself. "Students, please listen carefully. We are in a lockdown situation. I repeat, a lockdown. Stay inside your classrooms, lock the doors, and remain silent. I'll provide further instructions shortly. This is not a drill." My heart skipped. It was like everything froze. I remember looking around the room and seeing the same look of confusion on everyone's faces. Lockdowns were nothing new, but there was always a certain sense of routine to them. Teachers would calmly lock the doors, dim the lights, and we'd wait until the all clear signal. This felt different. I could see Mr. Harris was visibly shaken, his hands trembling as he locked the door. "Stay quiet," he whispered, almost to himself. The next few minutes felt like hours. I couldn't stop looking at the door, expecting it to be forced open at any moment. I thought maybe someone was pulling a prank, but the tension in the air felt wrong. My mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. The loudspeaker crackled again. "This is not a drill. Remain inside your classrooms. Do not open the doors under any circumstances. Please stay calm." I had a bad feeling, something deep in my gut telling me that something was seriously wrong. The voices outside the hallways seemed muffled, but I could swear I heard people running, footsteps echoing in quick bursts. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Something wasn't right. I remember hearing distant shouting, but it wasn't clear what was being said. My classmates whispered nervously, but I couldn't make out any words. I didn't even know if I was breathing properly. Then came the sound I'll never forget. A loud metallic bang, followed by another and another coming from the hall just outside our door. The sounds were so harsh, like someone was slamming their fist into the walls, or worse, trying to break down the door. I looked to Mr. Harris, his face pale as he stood at the front of the room. His hands were shaking, and I saw him staring at the door like he could somehow will it to stay shut. His lips moved, but no words came out. Suddenly, the lights flickered, then went out. It was pitch black. The only sounds in the room were our collective breathing. I could feel the panic spreading like static in the air. Someone gasped, and then someone else started crying. I didn't want to cry, but the fear was overwhelming. We sat there in silence for what felt like an eternity. I swear, every little sound outside the room made me jump. But then, after what felt like hours, the intercom clicked back on. It was Principal Larkin again, but this time, his voice was different. There was something distorted in it, like it wasn't even him. I can't. Don't. Stay. It was garbled, but the urgency in it was clear. Then the sound of static filled the air before the intercom cut off completely. Everything went quiet, too quiet. No one moved, no one spoke. We just stared at the door, waiting. And that's when we heard it. A soft scratching. It started low, just a faint rustling noise from behind the door, as if something was crawling slowly on the other side. I leaned forward, heart hammering in my chest. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, like nails scraping against the wood. Then it stopped. For a few seconds, there was nothing. But then, something even worse happened. A voice from the other side of the door. "Let me in." It was soft, almost pleading. But I could hear the tremor in it, like whoever, or whatever, was on the other side knew we were listening. We froze. None of us dared to make a sound. I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears, and I swear I felt the walls closing in. "Please." The voice was muffled again, as if it was pressing itself against the door, trying to get closer. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe. A few seconds later, another voice joined the first, but this one sounded deeper, more menacing. Mister, in the sound of heavy breathing filled the room, like something was right on the other side of the door, waiting. I don't know how much time passed, but I heard a loud bang again. And then, footsteps, slow but deliberate. I heard someone, or something, walk down the hallway, away from our door. Then silence. Finally, the lights flickered back on, and the intercom crackled to life again. But this time, Principal Larkin's voice was clear. "The lockdown is over. Please remain in your classrooms until further notice." The door opened a few minutes later, and we were ushered out of the room. The hallways were eerily quiet, with no sign of the chaos we had just heard. As I walked past, I noticed something strange. There was no sign of any damage, no scratches on the door, no indication of the banging we'd heard. It was as if nothing had happened at all. But the fear still lingered. I can't explain what happened that day. The police came later and searched the school, but they found nothing. No intruders, no broken doors, nothing. I'll never forget the voices, the ones that begged to be let in. And every night since then, when I close my eyes, I hear that scratching again. I still don't know what happened. All I know is, whatever it was, it didn't belong there. I'm not sure it's gone.